My brother Will was standing in the middle of my kitchen, his face a mask of cold, quiet fury. He was holding the door of my refrigerator open. It was empty. "Hattie, what is this?" he demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. The kind of quiet that precedes a storm. "It's the 28th of the month. Where's your food? You look sis. Why are you starving? Your federal pension is over $7,000 a month. I helped you file the damn paperwork." Before I could even form a lie, before I could try to protect him to shield my son from the blast, Robert laughed from the sofa in the next room. Laughed. He sauntered into the kitchen, not walking but strolling, like a king in his domain. He was wearing a new plush designer tracksuit I'd never seen, holding a $15 vibrant green smoothie. He was arrogant, dismissive, completely oblivious to the coiled, dangerous energy that had just walked into the house. He thought Will was just another old man like me. "Oh, she's fine, Uncle Will," Robert said, waving his smoothie dismissively, not even looking at Will directly, his eyes on his phone. "She's just being dramatic. She loves to play the martyr, right, Mom?" Will just stared at him. The silence in the room was absolute. Terrifying. Robert, mistaking the silence for interest, continued, puffing up his chest. He wanted to brag, to finally feel like a man in front of the uncle he had always feared and resented. "You asked where her money is," he said with a proud, stupid smirk. "I give all her money to my wife. Tiffany manages the family fund now. It's all about joint assets, smart finance. You know, she handles everything." He beamed with pride, like he just announced a major promotion at a job he didn't actually have. He was proud of this. Proud that he, the provider, had successfully managed his mother's assets by giving them to his wife to spend on cars and clothes. My brother just stared at him. The silence stretched, becoming thin, sharp. Then, very slowly, very deliberately, Will took off his travel-worn coat. Robert, still arrogant, still completely oblivious, actually smirked again. "Whoa, Uncle Will. Getting comfortable. You staying long?" He thought the old man was getting ready to yell, to have a pointless, old-fashioned argument. Will didn't say a word. He just draped the coat over the back of the cheap, trendy dining chair Tiffany had bought with my money. And as he did, the gesture revealed what was underneath. It revealed the unmistakable polished black leather holster on his hip. It revealed the glint of his department-issued service weapon. And it revealed the gleaming, heavy gold detective's badge clipped firmly, professionally to his belt. Robert froze. His arrogant smirk evaporated as if it had been wiped clean. He knew his uncle was a cop, but in his mind, cop meant a simple, uniformed patrolman, someone blue-collar like his grandfather. Not the... He stared at the badge. He stared at the gun. Major crimes. Financial fraud division. Robert's smoothie-holding hand began to shake. The color drained from his face. He was, for the first time in his pathetic, entitled life, literally completely paralyzed. "Let me tell you how we got here. Let me tell you how my son mistook his uncle, a major crimes detective, for just another simple man he could fool. And let me tell you what happens when a 40-year fraud auditor finally decides to let her brother the law see the books." Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. First, let me tell you who I really am, because my son Robert and his wife Tiffany have no idea. To them, I'm Harriet Hattie Monroe. Mom. A 68-year-old widow, a retired, low-level clerk from the GSA. I'm simple, I'm frail, I'm old-fashioned. They see my sensible shoes, my quiet habits, my refusal to buy the latest $1,000 phone, and they see a woman who doesn't understand money, a woman with a poverty mindset, a woman who needs to be managed. What they don't know, what they never bothered to ask, is that I wasn't a clerk. I was a senior federal grants administrator. My entire 40-year career was spent managing, auditing, and tracking multi-million-dollar federal budgets. I wasn't just balancing ledgers. I was designing the systems that tracked them. I was the one who investigated fraud, the one who found the lost $500,000 a contractor had tried to hide in a shell company. I was a professional. I was meticulous. And I was, as my son was about to learn, deeply, deeply underestimated. My late husband, Robert Sr., was a federal engineer. We weren't flashy, we were planners. We lived on his salary and invested all of mine, every single paycheck, for 40 years. My simple pension, combined with his survivor benefits, is exactly what my brother said, $7,240. Every month. Rain or shine. But that's just the income. The nest egg, the money from my own investments, the money from selling our fully paid off family home. That's my secret. A 7-figure secret they had no idea existed. I am not poor. I am by any sane measure secure. I am a professional. I am meticulous. And I am, as my son was about to learn, deeply, deeply underestimated. I don't just live simply, I live quietly. And I let people, especially arrogant people, see exactly what they want to see. My nightmare began 6 months ago, with the phone call every parent dreads, not a call from a hospital, but a call from a son steeped in failure, shame, and sheer unadulterated irresponsibility. Robert's life has been a string of big ideas. He's a serial entrepreneur, which is a polite term for a 42-year-old man who has never held a real job for more than 6 months. His businesses were a joke, a pathetic string of failures, a crypto scheme that imploded when the coin turned out to be a fraud. A drop-shipping empire that consisted of one unsold crate of fidget spinners sitting in their rented garage. A day trading career where he managed to lose $20,000 of his wife's, I suspect, in an afternoon. He and Tiffany, a lifestyle influencer, which means she takes pictures of things she can't afford, and puts hashtags on them, were living in a flashy high-rise rental apartment downtown that cost a fortune. Their brand was all about hustle and manifesting abundance. In reality, it was built on a mountain of credit card debt and high-interest loans. And now, predictably, it had all collapsed. They had been evicted. They came to my small, paid-off, perfectly peaceful bungalow, their eyes red, their faces a mask of practiced, theatrical despair. "Mom, we're going to be on the street," Tiffany had wailed, her $2,000 Gucci handbag, a fake, I could tell, clutched to her chest. "The kids, we have nowhere to go, they're changing the locks on Monday." "It was the market, Mom," Robert mumbled, his classic excuse, his eyes downcast. "It turned on me. Just bad luck." My analyst's brain knew it wasn't bad luck. It was catastrophic irresponsibility, arrogance, and a fundamental inability to live in the real world. But my mother's heart, that foolish, bleeding, traitorous organ, caved. I looked at my son, my only child, and I saw the desperate, terrified boy he still was underneath all the bluster. I couldn't let them move into my small bungalow. I'm retired. I've earned my peace. Their chaotic, performative, noisy energy would have driven me insane. So I made a strategic, and ultimately fatal decision. I proposed a compromise. "You need a fresh start," I'd said, my voice firm, the voice of the administrator, the problem solver. Not just a handout, a structure. I knew I couldn't just give them money. They'd burn through it in a week on another stupid investment or a pile of designer clothes. "I'll help you," I said, "but on my terms." I used my secret savings, the substantial nest egg I'd built from my own investments, the money they knew nothing about, and I bought a house. I paid cash. Not a mansion, not in their aspirational neighborhood. A modest, clean, perfectly respectable 3-bedroom house in a decent older middle-class neighborhood with good public schools. The kind of house I lived in. The house was 100% in my name. Legally. Fiscally. Absolutely. It was my asset. My investment. "We can all live here together," I proposed. "A decision I will regret until my dying day. It's in my name, so you're protected from creditors. I'll take the small room. You and Tiffany and the kids can take the master and the other bedroom. This way you can get back on your feet. Save your money, live rent-free, and we can all be a family." I thought I was setting a boundary. I thought I was being generous but smart. I was protecting my asset, while providing them a roof. I thought I was giving them a structured lifeline, a chance to finally get their lives in order. I didn't realize I was handing them the keys to my prison. I didn't realize I was moving into a cage I had just paid for. A cage they would happily lock from the outside. The moment they moved in, it was not a family merging, it was a hostile occupation. "Oh, Mom, the master? With the ensuite?" Tiffany had said, her voice dripping with that fake, pitying tone she'd perfected. "You'd be so far away from the kids, on the other side of the house. And all those stairs, at your age. No. You take the small room downstairs, the one by the kitchen and the laundry. It's cozier, much more practical for you. We'll take the master. We need the space for our work. And the kids can have the other big room upstairs." Before I could even argue, before I could point out that I was the one who bought the house, their boxes, their mountains of ridiculous flashy junk, were being hauled into the master bedroom. My single bed, my small dresser, my one comfortable reading chair, they were relegated to the smallest, coldest room in the house. The one that smelled faintly of mildew and was right next to the noisy water heater, which clanged and banged all night. Their work consisted of Tiffany taking selfies in her new larger bedroom, which she immediately painted a hideous trendy shade of charcoal gray, and Robert setting up a massive 3-monitor gaming rig in the other spare bedroom, which he immediately and loudly claimed as his new office. They weren't guests. They weren't partners in a new family arrangement. They had staged a quiet, bloodless coup, and I, in the very house I had just paid cash for, had been instantly expertly demoted from owner and benefactor to tenant. And as I would soon find out, that was only the beginning. The real takeover, the one that truly sealed my fate, didn't happen with furniture. It happened with paperwork. It happened about a month after we moved in, just as the first massive post-move-in credit card bills were undoubtedly landing on their laptops. Tiffany, who had been handling all the household setup and getting them on the grid, her words, approached me one afternoon. She had a stack of official-looking mail, a bright, fake, professional smile plastered on her face, and an air of profound, manufactured concern. "Hattie," she said, calling me by my first name, a new chilling power play she'd recently adopted, a way of demoting me from mom to just some person living with them. "This is all just so confusing. I've been trying to sort out the bills for the new house, and it's a mess." She fanned the envelopes out on the kitchen table, which I had paid for. "We've got the electric, the water, the HOA fees, the high-speed internet, the new security system. I mean, who can keep track? It's too much for you to worry about. You're retired. You should be relaxing, not juggling due dates." I just looked at her, my old auditor's instincts tingling. "I'm perfectly capable of managing a few household bills. Tiffany, I managed the entire GSA's regional grant disbursement budget for 20 years. She laughed. A light, tinkling, utterly dismissive sound, as if I just told a charming senile joke. "Oh, Hattie, I know. You're a whiz. But why should you be? That's what I'm saying. Robert and I, we're a team. We want to help you. We want to take this burden off your shoulders." She slid a single pre-filled bank form across the table. "Look, Robert and I had a brilliant idea, to make it simple. For everyone, we'll just open a joint household account, a family fund. You know, we'll have all the bills for the house paid from it. The electric, the water, the groceries, everything. It's just cleaner, more efficient." I looked at the form. It was a standard joint account application. And she continued, her voice becoming even sweeter, more casual, as if this were just a minor housekeeping detail. "To make it really simple, so you don't have to worry about transferring money all the time, we can just have your $7,000 pension check deposited right in there, every month, automatically. That way I'll manage all the bills, I'll do all the work, I'll handle all the annoying online payments, and you won't have to lift a single finger. You'll be totally free. It'll be our family fund." It was a masterful performance. She was framing the complete and total seizure of my entire income as a favor, as an act of generous, selfless service to me. "I don't know, Tiffany," I began, the alarm bells in my head now screaming. "Mom?" Robert's voice. He'd been waiting in the wings, the muscle. He walked into the kitchen, putting his arm around Tiffany's shoulder, presenting a united front. "Mom, she's right. It just makes sense. You trust us, don't you? We're your family. We're trying to take care of you." He held out a pen. "Just sign here, Mom. It just adds Tiffany to the account, so she can pay the bills. It's easier for everyone." I looked at my son. His eyes were pleading, but not with love, with a kind of desperate, greedy impatience. He wasn't protecting me, he was handling me. I was trapped. If I said no, I'd be the difficult one, the untrusting one. I'd be the one creating drama. And I was, I admit, tired of fighting them, tired of the constant, low-level tension in the house I owned. So in a moment of profound, life-altering weakness, a moment I will regret until the day I die, I signed the form. I trusted my son. I trusted that deep down, he was still the good boy I'd raised. I had just, with a simple stroke of a pen, handed the keys to my entire financial life to a pair of con artists. A pair of arrogant, entitled, ruthless con artists who just happened to be my own family. The $7,240 my entire monthly income hit the new family fund account on the first of the very next month. By the 5th, it was gone. The immediate second they had legal, unfettered access to my pension, the dynamic in the house shifted. It wasn't just a subtle change. It was a violent, lurching gear shift. The thin, peeling veneer of grateful children and concerned family was ripped away, revealing the raw, ugly, parasitic reality underneath. My $7,040, which was meant to pay for all the household expenses in a house that was mortgage-free, mind you, with thousands of dollars left over for my own use, was immediately, systemically, and completely siphoned. Tiffany and Robert didn't just pay the bills with it, they drained the account. A new gleaming metallic black leased Mercedes G-Wagon appeared in the driveway. "It's for the brand, Hattie," Tiffany explained, not even bothering to look at me as she breezed past, her arms full of designer shopping bags. "You can't show up to client meetings in a Honda." My paid-off, perfectly reliable CR-V, which was now relegated to parking on the street. Her wellness business, which had been just a sad-looking website and a few hundred bored followers, suddenly had inventory. Boxes and boxes of expensive, private label supplements, skin creams, and aura cleansing crystals began arriving daily, all paid for from the family fund. My fund. They went out. A lot. To lavish $500 a plate steak dinners. I saw the receipts left on the counter, to networking cocktails. They posted photos on Instagram, their faces flushed with expensive wine, with the hashtag "Gone hard work pays off." And me, the woman who was funding this entire grotesque charade. My life became a living hell. I was no longer just the unpaid nanny. I was now officially the burden. The family fund was always empty by the 10th of the month. This meant that while they were dining on filet mignon, the household grocery budget, my grocery budget, was non-existent. "Hattie," Tiffany would say, her voice full of that familiar bored sigh, "I just can't believe how much food you eat. The grocery bill is astronomical. You must be snacking at night. We're going to have to cut back." Cut back. They were spending $7,000 a month on cars and clothes, and I was the one who needed to cut back. While they were living like royalty on my pension, they did the one thing that was, I now realize, the final, unforgivable humiliation. They put me on a household allowance. "Mom," Robert explained, his voice full of that false man of the house authority he'd adopted since getting his hands on my money. "To keep the budget clean and efficient, Tiffany is going to give you an allowance for your personal items. From the fund." My allowance. For my personal items. From my own $72.40. It was $50 a week. "Just for your little things, you know," Tiffany said, her smile brittle, as she handed me 2 20s and a 10, as if bestowing a great charity. "Your toiletries, your teas, any special snacks you want. The main house groceries are just for, you know, the family." The unspoken rule was clear. The food they bought with my money, the expensive organic grass-fed steaks, the artisanal cheeses, the $15 boxes of quinoa, the endless bottles of imported sparkling water, was their food. The fridge, while technically full, was forbidden to me. My small, cold room in the back of the house became my prison. And my shelf in the pantry, my small corner of the refrigerator, became my shame. I was living on $50 a week. $50. I couldn't afford my co-pays for my blood pressure medication. I couldn't afford to buy new clothes. My old ones were becoming worn and thin. The $50 after my medication barely covered a loaf of bread, some eggs, a block of cheap cheese and tea. I was, quite literally, starving in my own house. A house I had paid for with cash. I lost weight. A lot of it. I was always cold, always tired, my hands shaking from low blood sugar and a quiet, constant simmering rage. The empty house my brother was about to see wasn't the house itself. That was overflowing with their new expensive tacky junk. It was my shelf in the pantry. It was my crisper drawer in the fridge. It was me. I was the one who was empty. I was too ashamed to tell anyone. How could I tell my brother, my strong, proud, fiercely protective brother Will, that my own son, the boy I had raised, was treating me like this? That he was starving me, all while he and his parasitic wife got fat and flashy off my life savings. The shame was too much. It was suffocating. So I hid. I lied. I told Will I was fine, just tired. I told my friends I was enjoying a quiet retirement. I was a professional in documentation, and I was living inside the biggest, ugliest fraud of my life. A fraud perpetrated by my own son. My brother Will Bishop is not a man you lie to. Not successfully anyway. Will is 10 years younger than me, but he's always been my protector. After our parents passed, I raised him. I put him through school, supported him, cheered him on as he bypassed the safe roads and chased his own, much rougher path. He's a detective. Not just a cop, a high-ranking 30-year veteran, major crimes, financial fraud division. He's my opposite, where I am quiet. He is blunt, where I am analytical. He is instinctual, and his instincts are flawless. He lives in another city, a 5-hour drive away, but we talk every Sunday, or at least we used to. Since I'd moved in with Robert and Tiffany, my calls with Will had become strained. Tiffany was always there, hovering, listening, her presence a clear signal to keep it light. I couldn't talk freely, and Will, my brother the detective, sensed it immediately. "Hattie, you sound thin," he'd said on the phone just last week. His voice was sharp, analytical, not just making conversation. "Are you eating okay? You sound stressed." "I'm fine, Will. Just fine," I chirped, my voice cracking with that false high-pitched brightness I'd come to despise. "Just tired. You know, retirement, and the grandkids run me ragged." He didn't buy it, right? He'd said, his voice flat, unconvinced. You sure, sis? Because you know, if that son of yours or his ridiculous wife are... "Everything is fine, William." I'd cut him off too sharply. The panic of Tiffany overhearing me was too great. There was a long, cold silence. "Okay, Hattie," he'd said finally. "Okay, talk soon." He didn't buy it. He didn't buy it at all. He decided to use his vacation time. He didn't call. He didn't warn me. He knew if he did, I'd just make an excuse, put on a performance. He decided to pay me a surprise visit for my 68th birthday. He drove all night. He arrived on a Friday afternoon. Tiffany was out at a brand meeting. Robert was in his office, gaming, the sounds of virtual explosions echoing faintly. The kids were at school. I was in the kitchen, listlessly stirring a pot of thin, watery, pale yellow soup I'd made from a single bouillon cube and some wilting, slightly soft carrots. My $50 allowance was gone, and it was still 2 days until Tiffany would gift me the next installment. I was hungry. I heard a key in the front door lock. The spare key I had given Will years ago, the one to my old bungalow, which I'd insisted he keep on his ring, a key I'd forgotten he had, a key that by some miracle also worked on the cheap standard locks of this new house. The front door opened. "Hattie?" Will's deep, booming, beloved voice echoed in the cavernous, empty-feeling house. I froze. The spoon dropped from my hand, clattering into the pot. In here, Will." He walked into the kitchen, and he stopped dead. He was in his travel clothes, his duffel bag still slung over one broad shoulder, and he just froze. He stared at me, at my thin, frail, trembling frame, at the worn, faded, stained housecoat I was wearing. My good clothes were too loose now, at the pathetic, watery, pale yellow soup on the stove, at my face which I'm sure was etched with a bone-deep weariness that no amount of smiling could hide. His face, which had been set in a smile of happy surprise anticipation, became a mask of cold, dark, terrifying rage. Will didn't say hello. He didn't hug me. His duffel bag was still slung over one broad, powerful shoulder. He just stood there, in the doorway of my own kitchen, and stared. He stared at me, at my thin, frail, trembling frame. He stared at the worn, faded, stained housecoat I was wearing, the one Tiffany had relegated from her charity pile. He stared at the pathetic, watery, pale yellow soup I was listlessly stirring on the stove, a meal that wouldn't have satisfied one of my grandchildren, let alone a grown woman. His face, which had been set in a smile of happy surprise anticipation when he walked in, became a mask of cold, dark, terrifying rage. It was a look I hadn't seen on his face since we were children, just after our father died, when he'd caught a neighborhood bully trying to steal my school books. It was a look of pure, righteous, protective fury. "Hattie?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet, the kind of quiet that precedes a hurricane. "What the hell is this?" I couldn't speak. The shame was a physical, choking thing in my throat. I just shook my head, my eyes flooding with the tears I had refused to shed for months. Tears of humiliation, of hunger, of a profound, bottomless shame. He didn't wait for an answer. He strode past me, his movements economical, precise, like a detective securing a scene. He wasn't my little brother, Will, anymore. He was Detective Bishop. He went straight to the refrigerator, the massive $5,000 Sub-Zero monstrosity that Tiffany had insisted on, and yanked the door open. The top shelves, their shelves were overflowing. artisanal cheeses wrapped in wax paper, bottles of expensive champagne and white wine, imported olives, quinoa salads in sealed plastic containers, fillets of smoked salmon, grass-fed steaks in a butcher's wrapping, tubs of organic $15 a pint ice cream. It was a picture of abundance, of careless decadent wealth. Then, Will looked down, at the bottom vegetable crisper, my crisper, the one Tiffany had graciously allotted to me. Inside a half-empty, nearly expired carton of skim milk, a single, wrinkled, slightly soft apple, a hard, dry stick of butter, and my container of watery soup. That was it. My entire inventory of sustenance. Will stood there for a long terrible moment, just staring into the crisper. His back was to me, but I could see the muscles in his shoulders and neck bunching, coiling, like thick steel cables. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low, ragged, almost unrecognizable growl. "Sis," he whispered, his voice cracking with an emotion I couldn't even name, rage, grief, disbelief. "Why are you starving? For God's sake, Hattie, why are you starving?" He turned to face me, his eyes blazing, and the pain in them, the pain of seeing me like this, was almost harder to bear than the hunger. "Your federal pension," he said, his voice rising, gaining a sharp legal edge, "is over $7,240 a month. I know it is. I helped you file the goddamn paperwork after Frank died. Where is the money?" He was yelling now, not at me but at the universe, at the sheer impossible wrongness of the scene. And before I could even form a lie, before I could try to protect my son, to shield him from the blast, to find some way to spin this nightmare, Robert laughed. He laughed, from the sofa in the next room where he had been presumably listening to the entire exchange. A light, airy, amused chuckle. Robert sauntered out of his office, the room that should have been my master bedroom, drawn by the sound of Will's raised voice. He wasn't worried. He wasn't concerned. He was annoyed. We were disrupting his day. He was wearing a new plush designer velour tracksuit, a truly hideous shade of baby blue, a brand name I didn't recognize but knew must be expensive, splashed across the chest. He was holding a large, vibrant green smoothie, the kind Tiffany made in her $500 blender with my pension money. He looked relaxed, successful, proud. He hadn't seen Will in over a year, and he had completely, catastrophically misread the room. He didn't see a major crimes detective on the verge of exploding. He saw his boring Uncle Will, the cop, the man his mother had raised, the man who represented the old-fashioned world of work and rules that he and Tiffany so openly disdained. He saw my dramatic mother clearly playing the victim again, and he saw this entire tense, ugly confrontation as an opportunity to finally assert his status as the man of the house in front of the one man who had always, his entire life, intimidated him with his quiet, solid, masculine competence. He saw a chance to brag. "Oh, hey, Uncle Will," he said, his voice full of a smug, false man-to-man confidence. "Surprise visit, huh? We were wondering when you'd grace us with your presence." He took a loud, obnoxious slurp of his smoothie. He glanced at the open refrigerator, at Will's thunderous, disbelieving expression, and he chuckled. He actually chuckled, as if Will were the one being foolish, being naive. "Oh, she's fine, Uncle Will," Robert said, waving his smoothie dismissively toward me, as if I were a piece of malfunctioning furniture. "She's just being dramatic. She loves to play the martyr, right, Mom? It's her thing. She's not starving. She's just frugal." Will just stared at him, his face a mask of stone, his eyes black holes of contained rage. Robert, mistaking the silence for interest, for permission, continued, puffing up his chest. He was so proud of his next words. He was so proud of the system he had devised. "You asked where her money is," he said, as if it were the funniest, simplest, most logical question in the world. "It's not missing, Uncle Will. It's being managed." He beamed. He actually beamed with pride, like he'd just announced a major promotion at a real job, a job he didn't actually have. "I give all her money to my wife," he declared, as if this were an act of profound fiscal genius. "Tiffany manages the family fund now. It's all about joint assets, smart finance, you know. She handles everything, bills, investments, allowance, all of it. It's a modern marriage, way more efficient, takes the burden right off Mom's shoulders." He had just, with arrogant, stupid, breathtaking pride, confessed. He had confessed to the theft. He had confessed to the conspiracy. He had confessed to the entire ugly criminal enterprise. confessed it all, proudly to a 30-year veteran of the Major Crimes, Financial Fraud Division. He had no idea. He just stood there beaming, waiting for his uncle to congratulate him on his cleverness, on his modern solution. He had just with his own stupid bragging mouth, signed his own arrest warrant. Will just stared at him. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, terrifying. It was no longer the silence of a quiet house, it was the silence of a vacuum. My brother Will is a quiet man. You don't get to his rank in the department by being loud, by being a hothead. He's a planner, a thinker, but his quiet, the quiet I knew from our childhood, is the quiet of a coiled rattlesnake. It's the quiet of a loaded gun with the hammer pulled back, the trigger pressure already halfway there. Will looked at Robert, at his stupid proud bragging smoothie-holding face. He looked at Tiffany, who had just emerged from the master bedroom, drawn by the silence, her face a mask of annoyance that quickly morphed into confusion as she saw Will standing there. He looked back at me, at my watery soup, at my empty fridge, at my thin, shaking hands. Then, very slowly, very deliberately, he set his duffel bag down on the floor with a soft, heavy thud. He shrugged his heavy travel-worn coat off his shoulders. Robert, still arrogant, still completely, blissfully oblivious, actually smirked. "Whoa, Uncle Will, getting comfortable. You staying long?" He thought the old man was getting ready to yell. He thought Will was about to have a pointless, old-fashioned argument about respect or family. He was preparing to be condescending. Will didn't say a word. He just draped the coat over the back of the cheap, trendy, uncomfortable dining chair that Tiffany had bought with my money. And as he did, the gesture revealed what was underneath. It revealed the unmistakable polished black leather holster on his hip. It revealed the glint of his department-issued service weapon, a heavy no-nonsense Glock. And it revealed the gleaming heavy gold detective's badge clipped firmly, professionally to his belt just above his hip. Robert froze. His arrogant smirk evaporated as if it had been wiped clean, replaced by a slack-jawed, gape-mouthed look of pure, uncomprehending shock. He knew his uncle was a cop, of course, but in his mind, cop meant a simple, uniformed patrolman. Someone blue-collar like his grandfather. Someone he, a fintech entrepreneur, could easily dismiss. He did not know this. He stared at the badge. He stared at the gun. Detective. Major Crimes, Financial Fraud Division. Robert's smoothie-holding hand began to shake, violently. The expensive green liquid sloshed over the rim. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sickly, grayish-white pallor. He was for the first time in his pathetic, entitled life, literally, completely paralyzed. He finally understood. He hadn't been bragging to his boring Uncle Will. He had just confessed, proudly and on the record, to a high-ranking specialized detective. He had just confessed his crimes to the law. Tiffany, who had been gliding into the room with a practiced, oh-so-bored look on her face, ready to be dismissive to the unexpected guest, saw the badge at the same moment Robert did. Her face, her perfectly made-up, manifesting abundance face, went completely starkly chalk white. All the color, all the life, all the arrogant self-satisfied brand energy, just vanished. Will's voice when he finally spoke was no longer Uncle Will. It was Detective Bishop. It was low, cold, and utterly devoid of any family warmth. It was the voice of the law. It was the voice I imagined he used in interrogation rooms, the voice that had broken men far tougher and far smarter than my son. "Robert Monroe Jr.," he said, his voice flat, his gaze never leaving my son's terrified, paralyzed face. "I am Detective William Bishop of the 19th Precinct Major Crimes Financial Fraud Division, and you just proudly and in my presence confessed to felony financial elder abuse, theft by conversion, and conspiracy to defraud, all Class B felonies in this state." Robert just stared, his mouth open, his smoothie forgotten. He was literally, physically paralyzed. He made a small choking sound. You, Robert stammered, his brain clearly unable to process the new, terrifying reality. "I'm what, Robert? Your Uncle Will?" Will took a single, slow, deliberate step forward. "I'm a cop. I've been a cop for 35 years. I investigate scum just like you for a living. Thieves, grifters, parasites who feed on the vulnerable." He looked at me, at my thin frame, at my watery soup, and his voice dropped even lower, thick with a rage so profound it was almost a physical force. "And you just confessed to me that you've been doing it to my sister. This is a family matter." Tiffany finally found her voice, though it was a high-pitched terrified squeak, a sound I had never heard from her before. You can't, this is entrapment. You're out of your jurisdiction, you can't arrest us. Will actually laughed. A single, barked, humorless, terrifying laugh. Entrapment. Ma'am, I'm on vacation. I didn't ask your husband to confess to a string of felonies. He just volunteered it, bragged about it. In fact, he turned his gaze on her, and for the first time I saw Tiffany flinch, physically recoil. And jurisdiction, he said. Ma'am, financial elder abuse, theft, fraud. Those are crimes with no jurisdiction I can't touch. But you're right. This is a family matter, which is why, he added, his voice turning to pure ice, I'm not going to handle this as a detective. Not yet. I'm going to handle this, he said, as a brother. Robert, who had been frozen, finally moved. He dropped his smoothie, the expensive glass container shattered on the kitchen floor, splashing green, toxic-smelling sludge and broken glass everywhere. He just stared at the mess, his whole body shaking, finally understanding the mess he was in. Will didn't yell. He didn't posture. He was a detective. He began his investigation, right there. He pulled out his real phone, the one from his job, and turned on the audio recorder. For my records, he said, his voice all business. Hattie, he said, his voice softening, just for me. Where are your bank statements? The ones for the joint account, the family fund? I was crying now, silent tears of shame and a strange, terrible, agonizing relief. In the kitchen desk drawer, I whispered, pointing, the one Tiffany manages. Will walked to the desk. He pulled open the drawer, and there it was. Tiffany's household ledger, a brightly colored binder with Our Best Life written on it in gold script. And inside, the bank statements for the family fund account. Will pulled them out. He looked at the first statement. His face, which was already hard, somehow became even harder. Jesus, Hattie, he whispered, his voice full of a pain that mirrored my own. He held it up, his eyes scanning the page, his detective's mind instantly processing the fraud. Deposit, October 1st, $7,240. Pension, USGSA. Survivor benefit, OPM. His voice was a low, steady, damning monotone. Transfer, October 2nd to Tiffany's Wellness LLC. $3,000. Transfer, October 3rd to R. Monroe Crypto Fund. $2,000. Withdrawal, October 5th Neiman Marcus, $1,200. Withdrawal, October 6th, Mercedes-Benz Leasing. He read the list, line by damning line, a relentless, systematic monthly draining. By the 15th of the month, he said, looking up, his eyes black with fury, the account was empty. Every month, for 6 months. He looked at Tiffany, who was now backed against the wall, her face a mask of pure trapped rat terror. He looked at Robert, who had sunk onto the sofa, his head in his hands, sobbing like a child. And this, Will said, pulling out another statement from the back of the binder, must be her allowance. A weekly transfer, from Tiffany's Wellness LLC to Hattie's household. $50. He looked at me. They were giving you an allowance of $50 a week, from your own I just nodded, the shame burning my throat. The evidence is all here, Will said, his voice full of a cold, satisfied professional finality. A perfect, damning, beautifully organized ledger of your greed. You even itemized it for me, Tiffany. That's efficient. Tiffany, seeing it all unravel, seeing her own meticulous records turned against her, let out a small, strangled wail. Will didn't just yell. He didn't just threaten. He made the call, right there. In my kitchen. Yeah, this is Detective Bishop, badge number 722 out of the 19th. He said into his phone, his voice all business, all cop. I am currently at 24 Willow Creek Drive, in this jurisdiction. I am on vacation, but I am on duty and I am standing at a crime scene. I have 2 suspects, Robert Monroe Jr. and Tiffany Monroe, in a clear-cut ongoing case of felony financial elder abuse, theft by conversion, and conspiracy to defraud. He paused, listening. Yes. I have physical bank statements, full access to the victims' accounts, and a full voluntary and let's say, enthusiastic confession from one of the suspects. I am requesting an immediate patrol car and an arrest team to take these individuals into custody for processing. I will secure the scene until they arrive. He listened again. Yes, I'll secure the scene. Bishop out. He clicked his phone shut. Robert, hearing the words arrest team in custody, finally looked up. His face a mask of pure uncomprehending childish horror. Uncle Will, no. You can't. I'm your family. I'm Hattie's son. Will looked at him, his contempt a physical, tangible force in the room. You stopped being her son the moment you decided her pension was your paycheck. You stopped being my family the moment you let your sister starve. He walked over to me, took off his own heavy coat, and wrapped it gently, tenderly around my trembling shoulders. He went into his duffel bag and pulled out an energy bar and a bottle of water. The emergency stash of a man who worked long, hard, unpredictable hours. Here, Hattie, eat. It's over. I sat there, wrapped in my brother's coat, sipping the water, my hands still shaking, and I watched. I watched as 15 minutes later a marked police car pulled up, its lights flashing silently. I watched as 2 uniformed officers, young, serious and clearly respectful of my brother who met them at the door, badge in hand, came inside. I watched as Will explained the situation, quietly, clinically handing them the bank statements, the deed to my house, the evidence of their theft. I watched as my son Robert and my daughter-in-law Tiffany in their expensive designer tracksuits and silk pajamas were read their rights. I watched as they were placed weeping and protesting in handcuffs. I watched as they were led out of my house, and placed in the back of the police car. My brother, the law, finally gave me peace. And as for Robert and Tiffany, their lavish new lifestyle, their brand, their hustle, it was all just transferred to a much smaller state-run gated community. The last I heard, Tiffany's Wellness LLC was being dissolved in bankruptcy court, and Robert, in exchange for testifying against his wife's more elaborate schemes, was facing 5 to 10 years. I, on the other hand, am in my kitchen. My kitchen. It's full of food, and it is for the first time in a very long time, quiet. The sickness was diagnosed, the rot was cut out, the auditor finally had closed the case. Thank you for watching.